Providing a dose of rationality, critical thinking, and skepticism from a conservative atheist perspective, this is the Bitchspot Report podcast. Every week, your host will bring you news of note and commentary on topics of interest in hopes of sparking intelligent discussion on important issues of the day. It's not pretty, it's probably not safe for work, but we tell it like it is and offer no quarter to the credulous, the gullible, or the downright stupid. It's not for the easily offended or for the religiously or liberally minded, but it is about 90 minutes of secular conservative entertainment. So let's get right to the show. Oh look, people open their mouths and stupid falls out. That seems to be a trend this week on the Bitchspot Report podcast. We get a priest who gets suspended after he defends pedophilia on television. We've got a Fox News guest who thinks anything she doesn't like is verbal rape. We get an 8th grader being suspended from school because apparently his shirt is dangerous. We get 15 people indicted for parading a Confederate flags through a black child's birthday party. And then we wrap it all up by talking about the speed things are changing in the United States and abroad, and if we ought to expect things to stay the same. Here we go again down the stupid slide, so it's just another week around here. How you doing other than being sick?
I'm doing fine. I'm just, there's times when we look at this and there's these important subjects, and there's times when I check these stories and want to make really certain we didn't actually grab an onion story.
These are all onion stories.
Yeah, as I said, isn't it sad to be, just as a pro-pros, don't you feel sorry for the onion guys? They spend all day coming up with some little fake, story to poke fun at something, and then they look at CNN and just go, shit. It actually sounds more reasonable than what I just saw on CNN.
Right.
So,
yeah, I don't know. It's just, I lose my faith in humanity every week when I do this show.
Well, I never lose my faith in humanity. One day.
Well, yeah, you never had any faith in humanity.
I have tremendous faith in humanity, and when I become God Emperor, it will be shown as everyone will be following my lead. Now you really lost your faith in humanity.
That's true.
But we do have some odd stories today.
Yes, we do. Well, at least the world hasn't ended again.
That's true. I was waiting for
We've gone another week and the world hasn't ended. What the hell's going on?
I poked my head out my window and I realized, crap, the world's still here. Oh, guess I gotta talk to my bank.
Yeah. I took my brand new puppy outside today for the first time in her life. I mean, other than being carried through it, and she just freaked.
It's the world.
Oh my God! It's sun. What is that bright thing in the sky? Ah!
I will protect you from it.
Yeah, and she just sat there, and I mean, she's like half a pound and sits in your hand, but she just sits there and shivers, and it's like, yeah, dog, if you knew what the hell the world was really like, you'd be doing that 24/7.
Just don't go to the parts of the world where dog is on the menu.
Yes. Oh, did you see that, and I don't know if this was a spoof or something, but there was a video I saw out there a week or so ago, ostensibly about a vegetarian who went to a restaurant and started demanding why they aren't serving dog meat. Hey, did you ever see that video?
No, I didn't, but it's a common thing among a lot of vegans is that, why don't we serve dog meat if we serve cow meat? And well, the answer is because our culture sees dogs differently. There are places where dogs are served as food. Some of those places, because dogs are now seen more as pets than food, that's falling out of style. But, of course, another reason you don't generally serve dog as food is most dogs don't have a lot of meat on their bones.
Well, I mean, that's true, but I was watching this thing, and she's just going, you serve cows, you serve chickens, you serve pigs, I want dog. It's like, lady, you wouldn't eat any of the other stuff they were serving anyway. Shut the fuck up. I mean, it's one thing to actually go out and have kind of a discussion about it. It's another to just be going around trolling.
Well, yeah, and that's really what it is. These are people who wish to be heroes in their own mind. It's just a little bit different about the people who troll on other things, but it's the same attitude. They want to be heroes in their own mind, so when they get thrown out, they can go back and say, I stood up to the man.
Yeah, again, granted, I do have a dog right now that would fit on a hamburger bun, but that's not the point.
No, don't put your dog on the hamburger bun. The dog will probably be unhappy.
I don't know. She'd probably eat it.
This is true. But then you've lost your hamburger bun.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do we have anything else before we just go into the craziness?
Let us dive into the reservation of crazy.
You asked for it.
I am strong.
And now the news.
Sometimes it just takes an honest priest to really explain what's going on in the Catholic Church. An Italian Catholic priest, Gino Flame, in a television interview, says he understands pedophilia, that it's really an attempt by children to find affection from among the priesthood. It may be a sin, but it's like all sins and must be accepted, and judging by a lot of priests, entirely embraced. Of course, Flame immediately got himself suspended for letting out a Catholic secret, but I think it really explains a lot. How many priests do you think actually think this is the case? That, no, there's nothing wrong with pedophilia. It's just kids who are looking for love in all the wrong places.
I would say that probably, I mean, and that is, of course, an extremely common defense that pedophiles make of all, not just priests, but all pedophiles. The idea, well, I couldn't resist their wily ways. I mean, in truth, it's common throughout history. I mean, this was, of course, one of the things that was common, about when you had men sleeping with their slaves. A lot of times they would say, well, we were powerless to resist her wily Nubian ways. So, it's a way of displacing guilt to the victim. You're not really victimizing them. You're just succumbing to their obvious attempts to draw you in. Generally these days juries don't buy it. So that doesn't work. But yeah, this is extremely common. The only thing I would say is unusual about it is generally this comes up when you're actually when you're actually in court instead of being on TV.
We don't know if this Flame guy is a pedophile or anything like that. And I'm not going to impugn his motives or, accuse him of anything that's unknown. But he also says, he goes out there and he goes, well, homosexuality is a disease. Apparently pedophilia isn't, but homosexuality is a disease. Well, apparently he's not aware that there's an awful lot of priests out there who are looking for affection among their other priests.
Or
are they going to defend it that way?
Yeah. I mean, this is just a case of, I don't really know. I mean, it's, well, beyond anything else, this is the kind of thing that has whoever's handling PR in the church just repeatedly slamming their head against the desk. Until the sweet case of unconsciousness comes upon them, because I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, when I look at this, you just kind of wonder, guy, what were you thinking?
Well, he's not, clearly.
Yeah. I mean, he's, what were you thinking? The church was going to go, oh yeah, he's actually right. I mean, because this is actually going to pop up, I bet you, on every damn civic trial you see regarding a pedophile priest. Cause one of the things they're always going to try to establish is that this is part of the church's culture, especially if you're going for a class action lawsuit against, a diocese or other church affiliated organization. And, having a priest up there saying, well, actually it's not our fault. It's these kids and their wanton ways. That's the kind of thing that, one side in a court loves to see and the other side doesn't want to see. And I'll leave it up to you to guess which the sides are. But,
yeah. I mean, my whole thing is, all right, I can understand, even if you want to take the position that these are children who are not finding the love that they need with their parents and they're out looking for it with other authority figures. All right, I can maybe kind of say, okay, I understand that for some children that might be the case. But that doesn't excuse the priests who are unzipping their pants and sticking their dicks in these kids.
I mean, the thing is, when I was teaching elementary, junior high, high school, it's a very simple thing. I don't care if a girl comes into the class and tries to flump herself on your lap. Never happened to me, but it did happen to another teacher I knew because she was going through a very bad time in her life and she was, looking for some form of affection. But what he did and what you're supposed to do is immediately move the child off the lap and sit up and say, okay, I think we need to talk right now and you need help. Because you are obviously distraught, you are looking for something in an inappropriate manner. What you really honestly need is a professional healthcare worker to figure out what's going on. you don't immediately say, well, sure, little girl / little boy, let's go on into the closet where I'll give you some help. No. The idea that the response is anything other than, okay, I'm going to back off, you need help. If necessary, I may have to completely remove myself from the scene because you have this fixation that is obviously unhealthy at this point.
Yeah. Well, the other weird thing that I found out from this article, the Vatican has a priest detox center dedicated to helping pedophile, alcoholic, and drug-addicted priests.
Yeah.
They seriously need this?
Honestly, given how big the church is, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's, one of the problems, of course, you run into things like this is people assuming priests are somehow superhuman, which obviously they're not. So, drug-addicted priests, pedophilia, obviously, pedophilia, if it's not acted on, is not a crime. I could see someone, seeking help. I'm not certain, how useful the help would be, because in general, religions have a really bad track record about actually using effective methods of therapy as opposed to methods of therapy that fit more with their preconceptions. But alcohol, drug addiction, all these things are things that would happen in any large organization. And in fact, I think there's some civil organizations that they may not do it directly, but they do fund centers for their employees.
Oh, I have no problem with them having this. I do think it's kind of funny that they don't mention, gay priests. They don't want to talk about gay priests because gay priests get booted to the curb. But pedophile priests? No, we keep those people.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is with homosexuality, it's one of those things where the church, all churches actually right now, especially in the West, are just so clearly behind the curve. And that's kind of an unusual thing in the sense that it has been such a dramatic shift over the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, the shift has been positively seismic in terms of acceptance of homosexuals, among the advanced nations of the world. Obviously not so much in other areas. There's lots of places, many of them dominated by hardcore religions that have yet to join the civilized, world in this area. But yeah, I mean, it's a case where the church is just finding itself so completely behind the times. And as we said, the fact that we have not fallen into utter debauchery as a result of our changes, that, the U.S. looks about like it did in the past, is another sign that the church, is going to increasingly be out of step.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the more that I look at this, it's like, do you think this is something that's systemic within the church, or is this just some crazy guy out there going, hey, I'm completely on board with pedophilia. I think it's fine, and I think it's the kid's fault.
I think that it's not systemic in the sense that it's agreed on by the church as a whole, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of people sharing his opinions, because again, that is a major mechanism among pedophiles, especially active pedophiles. I think, we obviously need to distinguish that there are men and women who are attracted to children who never act on it. So there's pedophilia, the psychological disorder, and then there's an active pedophilia who is actually engaging in criminal activity. But among active priests who are pedophiles, I would not be surprised at all if this is very common, even if they don't speak of it, because again, it's a common psychological mechanism, a justification.
Yeah, and that's actually pretty sad, but
yeah, it is. But
that's really what religion is, and so much of what religion teaches is it's just a justification. It's a justification for taking a position that you happen to be emotionally attached to, and then just going, well, we're going to throw God in there someplace, and that just makes it all okay.
And of course, another problem is that pedophilia is very difficult to get psychological assistance for because, let's face it, hey guys, I'm attracted to prepubescent children is not something calculated to make you popular in society or employable. I mean, one issue that you do run into things like this is that psychologists have mentioned, that taboo disorders where even admitting you have the disorder can completely destroy your life, puts people in a position often where they can't get help. And I would assume this is no less true in the church than it is anywhere else. So you have, people who are refusing to admit it, and then they come up with these justifications when they act on it. And of course, when you act on it, that's everything's, just goes to hell in a handbasket.
And then you get these guys who just show up on TV and go, oh yeah!
Yeah, and then you get those guys. I mean, it's kind of like Nambla. I'm not certain why he did that, but, maybe he wanted to be able to tell a real great story about the time he was forcibly retired from the church. I don't know,
What this would be like the priest boy love association or something.
Pambla.
Pambla, yeah.
But, so it's an interesting thing.
Well, it's a disturbing thing.
It's a disturbing, but, you know.
Kind of makes me wonder, because we've talked in recent weeks about how widespread homosexuality is probably in the priesthood. Are we thinking that maybe pedophilia is just as widespread? Or similarly widespread in the priesthood?
I don't know.
That's a scary thought. It really is. I mean, even more scary than all the cases of them molesting kids as it is, but...
Again, that's something because it is such a, you know, death admission that, you know, it's really hard to find that out. But,
well, we know where these people go to find jobs, at least.
Some of them.
Frightening stuff. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and move on?
Fox News guest loses it over Obama's remarks on Islam and Christianity. Star Parker believed that Obama committed verbal rape when he mentioned that, hey, guess what? Christianity has a fair amount that's not too cool in our history. And when we're talking about how evil and terrible Islam is, we should probably bring up the fact that, you know, Christianity doesn't have this unbroken stream of brotherly love for your fellow man. And according to Parker, his remarks amounted to nothing less than verbal rape, a declaration that even Sean Hannity thought went too far. Let me put it in context. This is Parker. I was in the room. It was verbal rape. Oh yeah, we were not expecting it. Nobody wanted it. It was horrible to sit through, and after it was all over, we felt like crap, because let me tell you why we were all there. And then we go, you know, he pulled the air out of the room. They were talking about how he disunified people. The question on the table was can these three major religions get along? And, you know, the problem is that, just to stop there, is that obviously one of the problems with the three religions getting along is, various religions always love to say the other religion is the tool of the devil and we're pure as the driven snow. And Obama was making a quite logical, quite correct statement that, you know, Christianity has not been that way, not always been that way. And, you know, hell, if you just go back even, several decades, you have Christianity heavily involved in the troubles in Ireland. So we are in a situation where it's not verbal rape, it's simply stating a historical fact. You know, these are facts. You don't actually have to search very hard to find terrible things.
Yeah, but Christians don't want to admit their own tarnished history. They'd rather just pretend that they've never ever done anything wrong and everybody else has always been the horrible people.
Right, and of course, you know, one of the problems here is that when Hannity is saying you're going a little too far, you've kind of gone off the reservation into Crazyville. It just gets to this thing, and, you know, a lot of this I think is bound up in just, you know, the continual dislike of Obama we have on the right, but also this feeling that Christianity can never be called on its crap. And, you know, Christianity has a lot of crap. Ask the Mormons about how accepting Christians were in the United States of America. There is a reason they moved to the middle of a desert. It was primarily because they thought they would be left alone in said desert, because who wants to go to a desert? Didn't work. You know, the moment we absorbed the Mormon Church, I mean, whether or not you like the teachings of the Mormon Church, the moment America absorbed the Mormon Church, it turned around once again to suppress them with a variety of mechanisms. You know, there were actually, you know, laws passed. We don't have laws against bigamy and polygamy, because it was any great love for women. Those laws were initially targeted specifically at the Mormon Church. So, you know, Christianity, even in the United States, where we have the First Amendment, has a history of not playing well to others.
Well, of course not.
So what gets me is this isn't verbal rape. This is simply explaining, and of course the problem is then you can point out this is something that's very important to talk about, because Islamic nations have a very big problem. It's called, in a lot of Islamic nations, you can get killed for apostasy legally. In the ones that don't, mobs show up and murder you. And you have a situation where, okay, how did Christianity get from then to now in the U.S.? How did we get to a secular state? That's an important historical question to ask, because that's kind of a model that you might be able to apply to these other nations. Because, you know, honestly, this issue isn't going to go away until Pakistan can have an atheist blog pop up and the people do not have to worry about the cops or a mob showing up outside their door.
But that's not going to happen in the Middle East because they don't have a secular society.
Right. And so, but part of that, we really didn't have a secular society for many years. So part of the thing in history, it's not verbal rape to talk about this because this starts the conversation asking, how do we create a superior society? And a superior society is a secular society. I don't care if you're religious or not. If you live in a secular society and you're religious, congratulations, is still superior because you don't have to worry about some other religion showing up and murdering you.
Yeah, besides, what the hell is verbal rape? I mean, these are two things that do not go together at all. It's like, oh no, he said something I don't like. It's the same as raping you. That's the kind of shit you get on the left, not on the right.
Well, you get that on both sides. I mean, remember, you go far enough right, you hit the left and vice versa.
Yeah.
When the far right and far left, as much as they would want to murder each other if you locked them in the same room, if you were an alien from the planet Galactic 7, you would walk in there and go, I don't see a difference. Okay, yeah, this fanatic's talking about one thing, that fanatic's talking about the other thing, but in terms of their outlook in life, they are fairly similar. But yeah, I mean, verbal rape, I mean, I don't know, maybe she was thinking of some 1970s disco, radio show where the DJ says, I'm going to be doing some sweet, sweet loving with my silky voice. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it's one of these ridiculous things. Obviously what she's trying to do, of course, is rape is one of our really hot button issues. The rapist is somebody who's actually worse than the murderer in a lot of people's eyes. So she's simply throwing out the worst accusation you can make and hoping it will stick.
Yeah, but
she's also plugging her book.
Oh, of course.
So,
Well, I mean, the other thing that she brought up is she said that, well, not everybody in the audience is Christian. Like, because I guess Dalai Lama was there or something. What the hell difference does it make? Is it like it's some deep, dark secret that the Christians are supposed to be keeping secret from the rest of the world, that they don't have a perfect track record? Newsflash, bitch! Everybody knows that Christianity has a very long, bloody history. You weren't aware of that?
If that's the plan, yeah. I mean, the thing is that, and also, of course, the problem is why don't you want to hear about this? Because part of making Christianity better, if you're a Christian, would be looking at these things and trying not to repeat our errors.
But they don't want to make Christianity better. If they did, they'd stop being sexist and they'd stop being racist and they'd stop hating gay people. And, they don't want to make it better. They just want to keep it exactly the same as it's always been.
Right, because the assumption is in this group is that Christianity is perfect in and of as it exists. I mean, these are kind of like the guys who run around screaming that the King James Bible is the Word of God. The only viable Word of God.
Yeah, but these are the same people who think Jesus was white and spoke English.
This is true, and probably a member of the NRA. I'm sorry, I saw the American Jesus poster a couple of days ago, but yeah, I mean, and of course one of the problems is that for these groups, especially if you're on the right, and yeah, to some extent on the left as well, if you actually go and read the gospel, there's some uncomfortable stuff there about modern day attitudes. Again, like to bring up the Jubilee, you're supposed to forgive all debts. That's not something that people like to hear. Because it would kind of shut down modern society, or it would make modern society radically different. But yeah, with this, I think she's just sitting there. She's trying to throw out this accusation. She's trying to, part of it maybe I'm trying to get up so that everybody quotes me so my book sells real well. But, it's really stupid because what Obama was saying was the truth. I mean, hell, you can actually go back and you can find, in most of the southern states, records of sermons where they flat out say, Jesus would have been a slave owner. Because slavery is godly. And then they drag some BS from the Old Testament to justify it, again forgetting the fact you're supposed to free your slaves regularly in the Old Testament, but we don't talk about that part if we're a southern slave owner.
Right, we only bring up the parts we like and we completely ignore the parts that we don't like. That's the way Christianity works.
Right, and especially in the South. I mean, really, if you look at this, the South was a case where, unlike in a lot of other places, the church became fully in bed with the slave owners. So, yeah, Christianity has a ton of terrible shit in its past. Every religion does, every nation does. This is not a hard thing to come up with, the idea that people, nations, cultures, creeds, we all have some bad stuff in our past because honestly, the past was horrible. You know, this is, what gets me is she seems to be surprised and is like, lady, you go back and the past was awful. I'm a historian. I don't want to live in the past. If someone gave me a time machine, I would kick them in the nuts, throw them in their time machine and send it somewhere else. Because I don't want to go back to the past. And this is just him bringing up the fact that religion, like everything else, is the further back you get, the worse it was. She can't handle it.
Well,
they can't handle it.
A lot of these people just can't handle any of this stuff. And these are the same people. And I mean, even going beyond religion, these are the same people who can't handle talking about bad things that have happened in America's past. These are the same people who can't talk about the bad things that have happened in their political party's past. They don't want to acknowledge that anything has ever gone wrong. They don't want to acknowledge that their shit smells. And that's not the reality, people. They think that they are and this is something that happens across the board. I think I've talked about it before, but there's an awful lot of people out there who they really seem to think that we are perfect today. Everything that we think today is perfect. Everything that we do today is perfect. Every position that we have today is the most perfect position that will ever be. But every point in history, they've always thought that way. And as we move forward, things change. In 100 years, they're going to look back at us like we're a bunch of fucking barbarians. No matter how wonderful we think we are. We can't be having this idea that we are perfect in our own attitudes today because they're our attitudes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the technical term for that is get off my lawn. I mean, but, in all seriousness, yeah, you have a situation where you look at these people and you look at the life, and of course, as you get older, we get less flexible. That's a scientific documented fact. And we love to think that in the future, our kids and grandkids, they may fiddle around and do a little bit of stuff, but they're not going to really change anything. And no, stuff is going to change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. That's how history works. People don't like that because it shows them that, well, I think part of it shows them is that if they admit it, they suddenly realize that they're a part of a chain. They're not the culmination of a pyramid.
Right, and that's what a lot of people really want to think.
And of course, the more you feel that you have the right to lead the nation, that you present yourself as some kind of moral guidepost, the harder it is to accept that, no, you will be replaced. It's common all over. I mean, think about all the people that spend $1 bazillion on, a casket and a crypt, and they try to do all kinds of stuff desperately to stay remembered because, the idea that one day we'll be replaced is scary to a lot of people.
I don't give a shit, man. When I'm dead, do whatever the fuck you want. Throw my body in a ditch. I don't care. I'm not using it anymore. Doesn't matter to me.
Personally, I hope by that point they'll be able to have a Futurama thing and put me in the head museum. But that probably won't be.
I don't want to do that.
So,
I don't want to be remembered. I don't give a shit. There's trillions of people who have lived on this damn planet. We don't remember virtually any of them.
I think we're stuck at billions still, tens of billions. But now for me, I have to admit that I think there was something cute with Jeremy Bentham having himself taxidermied and stuffed so he could always attend meetings. He's a reliable yes vote at the meeting.
That's only because he had a rope tied around his arm.
Yes, but, he still has a reliable, and besides, I mean, think of, I could always have myself stuffed and just eventually when everybody at the house gets tired of looking at me, it's the really weird thing to pick up a trash collection on Friday.
All in favor? Pull that rope. His hand goes up.
But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, and you get this honestly even in the secular world. I mean, because the religious people focus on heaven, but then you get to secular, the one I like to call the Star Trek heaven people, and they're always full about how one day we'll have a transhuman world and nobody will ever die and we'll upload our brain into the great immortal robot body. Never mind, that's not dying, that's making a copy. You're going to die. Whether or not you make a copy of yourself. But there is still that same sense there. They just give it a secular skin. But you've got that same terror of, I don't want to ever be in the past. It's a natural attitude, but it's pretty universal.
Yeah, but I think it's still idiotic.
Well, I think the problem is that when these people, they kind of define themselves by not dying rather than living. I mean, I've known people that spent their entire life terrified of not dying. They never actually got to the part where they lived and had any memories worth thinking of. Because, if you define success in life by not dying, then that's gonna be a demon sitting on your back, tormenting you all your life, because we're all gonna die. I don't care if you got your super god body in the transhuman future. Entropy exists in the universe. It's gonna break down everything.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of a discussion I had recently, and this is going off topic, but we never do that, where some guy was out there talking about cryonics as a right. No, he was basically going, well, we're just going to bring everybody back from the dead. Dude, until it actually happens, until you've actually brought one person back from the dead, it's fucking science fiction. It's a fantasy. You're hoping sometime in the future we figure this out, but until then, you got a bunch of heads in jars that are still dead. Until these people actually come back from the dead, you haven't accomplished anything. And this guy, it's like a religious faith with these people. Oh, well, no, they're all going to come back. Yeah, we're going to bring them all back. No, maybe they might. Could possibly happen. What happens if we never come up with the technology to do it? What happens if all these diseases that killed these people, we never cure them? What happens then? They all died and were frozen for, hundreds of years. Look at all that money that got wasted. Look at all the resources that got wasted of these people trying to live forever. Fucking die. Go get buried. Get recycled. Fuck off.
Well, not to mention the fact that most cases of cryonics, you talk to most legitimate scientists, they point out that when you freeze somebody in the brain, half the brain cells are now bursting because you just froze the cell. Go take a look at what happens if you actually freeze a block of meat solid. How it kind of all gets slimy because, the cells are now, in most cases, what they're really doing is they got frozen chunks of meat. They don't have perfectly preserved heads. They got frozen chunks of meat. But yeah, it's this desperation to one day live again, and it is, it's kind of sad in a way. I mean, because eventually you'll die. And what bothers me about a lot of these people is there's a sense of greed about them, because a lot of times, a lot of these people I've talked to are the same people that really hate kids. And you get the sense, no, they want to live in this eternal, we'll be the Lost Boys forever with Peter Pan, and we will be the ones to enjoy life. We don't need to build anything else. We don't need to think about what comes after us or try to make a better world for them. And that's kind of greedy. Because, no, eventually we're all going to shuffle off stage right. Stage right, Charles Gray exits. The crowd boos or cheers, depending on what it is. But then our children, our children's children, our job is to try to make their world a little bit better, as their job will be to make the world for their children.
Yeah, but a lot of these people don't give crap one about that. They figure, hey, we're going to be gone. Fuck the future.
Right, which is, a sad thing. And that's why a lot of times I really dislike, the transhumans. Because, seriously, guys, I've spoken to some of these people, and they say, well, we'll all live forever. We just won't have children. Because, the earth won't need any more people because we'll all be immortal. I can think a few things more disturbing than the image of a world full of ever older man-children with no actual children or sense of growth in it. That's not so much a world. That's a gigantic open-air mausoleum with zombies running around.
Yeah, but by the same token, you've got the people who think Jesus is coming back tomorrow, so we don't have to care. We can just ruin the planet. We can just fuck everything up because it doesn't matter. The world's gonna end anyway.
Right, they're two sides of the same coin. And it's kind of, guys, live in this world. Because seriously, I mean, I think it was Marcus Aurelius for the Christianity said, don't care if there's a God, just be a good man, everything else will take care of itself. That's a good thing to live by. Ditto for the ones on the, far transhumanism defector thing is that, the thing is to try to live a good life today. And don't spend your life chasing this immortality dream where you're going to end up just realizing you wasted everything. You chased the chimera. You were looking for the fountain of youth your entire life. You never found it.
Yep.
Now you're old.
Everybody's lived. Everybody's born. Everybody lives. Everyone dies. It's what happens when you live that matters. The rest of it is irrelevant because it happens to everyone.
Right. Now, to be honest, I have to admit, I'm not so much into life extension. But I would be really happy if by the time I'm 70, I can still have the physique of a 40 or 50 year old. Now that would be something worth achieving. if you could actually, not so much extend life, but extend health.
Well, we've already done that to a considerable amount, and it's screwing up our society because the old people that used to die are now not dying.
Well, the problem is that we have people who are living, but when I say try to keep our life going, I don't mean the way we have it now. I mean actually that, okay, you extend the period of your life when you're healthy and then really compress that last period where everything's falling apart. Because the problem is we have a lot of people who can live 10, 15, 20 years in the old folks home, in a convalescent home, people who are, have no quality of life, but we can keep them alive. I think instead of looking to extend our life, a viable thing would be looking to extend the time of life when we actually have quality of life.
And that's great until you start looking at retirement. And once you have people, all you're doing is basically saying, okay, well, we're just going to have to keep working for another 20 years. We're going to have to keep doing all this stuff for another 20 years. Okay. But all the fun stuff at the end that a lot of people are looking forward to and a lot of people are working for, you just put that off until you're falling apart.
Well, I mean, and that's another factor. This is all going to, because of course, as our productivity continues to shoot up, I've known a couple of, economists that say, we're going to, at some point, maybe, they don't know when, but they're talking decades, not centuries now, see a time when the amount of work any given person has to do declines. And, we see that today. I mean, obviously today we have a hell of a lot more free time than our forebearers in the 1800s. I mean, if you were a factory worker, the idea of an 8-hour job and then anything beyond 8 hours you get paid overtime for, they would have said, wow, come to Jubilee. When did Christ show up?
Yeah, but you've got a lot of people out there right now who are pushing for, well, we're just not going to work at all. We're just going to pay people. Well, where's that money going to come from? Well, we're just going to pull it right out of our ass. We're just going to pay people to be alive. There's people who are doing there's something like a minimum guaranteed income where they're just saying, hey, we're going to pay everybody money that just magically falls off trees. And then if they want more money, then they have to go get a job. Fuck you people,
Well, I know some people who, this is one thing. Of course, there's a bazillion different ways to handle that. And we might want to make this a main event because we are kind of going off topic. Okay, we're going so far off topic. I think I see the rear lights of the topic up ahead on the road. We've circled the nation. We're running into the topic now. We're going to hit the topic. So yeah, we should probably think about this because that's a big subject, and we'll surprise, we'll go over our deadline.
Yeah, not too much, I hope.
No, so we might want to talk about that for a main event some point.
Yeah, we can do that. All right, well, let's get back on topic and go back to the next story.
We hit the topic, okay. Well,
we found the topic again.
Let's exchange insurance information.
All right. This liberal gun hatred has gone far enough. An 8th grader in Oregon whose brother had just returned from serving in Iraq wore a patriotic shirt to school and got suspended because it depicted on the shirt a gun. Yes, there was a picture of a gun on the shirt, and out the kid goes. The school has a policy against anything that promotes alcohol, drugs, or violence, but the shirt does none of those things. It isn't pointing at anyone. Nobody's holding it. Nobody's shooting it. It's just leaning there. So, yes, once again, thanks for turning an institution of learning into one of stupidity. Fuck these people.
Well, it depends. Obviously, okay, this is something where you gotta once again understand the school's not going to say anything. The school almost certainly can't say anything because it's about a student. People need to understand that when the school is refusing to comment, quite often what you're actually seeing is a legal requirement at work there. They are not trying to sandbag. They may not have the legal right to talk, and they don't want to own up to another lawsuit. Depending on the regulations, this gets back to the point where zero tolerance doesn't make very many exceptions. So it could simply be that one of the definitions is having a weapon on your shirt
Which is stupid.
Which is stupid, but we live in a world of lawyers, and honestly, from the viewpoint of preventing liability, it may actually make legal sense.
There's no liability for something that's on somebody's shirt. Now, I'm fine with zero tolerance. as long as it's not ludicrous, as all of these no-gun policies tend to be. When you've got kids getting suspended for eating a Pop-Tart in such a way that it looks kind of like a gun, or a deaf kid who gets suspended for signing his own name, which someone thought looked like a gun, then you're getting into stupid territory.
This is stupid territory, and I would say, obviously, now, in this case, one of the things here is that, okay, there's a couple of problems. Back in the 1960s, there was a case, Tinker of Des Moines, school district. The Supreme Court had staked out a fairly strong First Amendment exception for children in schools. It was a case where kids wore black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. Things happened. Unfortunately, since then, the court has really, really walked back that decision. Speech today in schools, if you are a student, is far less protected than it was in the 1960s and 1970s. And in a lot of cases, if the school can come up with any justification, the court will generally agree with it. That's one problem. That's where you're getting some of these policies from, because it has been walked back. I think it's a terrible mistake. I mean, you could make an argument that even if all guns are prevented, this kid is wearing a shirt as a form of political speech. It's honoring the military, that would count as political. It should be covered under the First Amendment. But unfortunately, again, that's not quite so certain because of all the walkbacks since Tinker. Flip side is it's an in-school suspension, and really, in most cases, that doesn't even really show up.
The kid doesn't care. But I'm just looking at this going, all right, what's next? Are we going to suspend kids for talking about guns? For even acknowledging that guns exist at all? Do they want kids to pretend that they've never heard of guns? That's not reality, no matter how much these people wished it was. And with this kid's shirt, what the fuck's he going to do? Shoot somebody with his shirt?
Yeah, agreed. It's a stupid policy. Obviously context matters. Because if he came to for instance, he came to the school with a shirt, I've seen shirts out there with a gun firing bullets and say hello to Allah. Obviously that would be a no-brainer. Not just because it's a gun on the shirt, but because it's a fairly racist and violent message. This is not that. The biggest problem with zero tolerance, the biggest problem with a lot of these rules is that they remove the ability of the people on the scene to make a considered judgment. The lawyer may like it, but unfortunately it doesn't send a really good message to the students, which is hide behind the fucking rules. The other problem, of course, is that now, granted, when you take away zero tolerance, you also had abuses, but really there should be a happy medium between the two.
Yeah, but the problem in this case, they have a rule against anything that promotes violence. There is nothing about his shirt that promotes violence.
Right, and you could use that argument. In all seriousness, you could actually have him come to the school and say, okay, are you going to say the United States Marine Corps promotes violence? And at that point, you just say that, go to the school board meeting and ask that question. Because that's very much a have you stopped beating your wife yet question. There is no way to win that question, because if you say it does not promote violence, obviously the shirt should be allowed. If you say it does promote violence, you're probably going to annoy all the former Marines in your audience, because, you just said that, okay, well, what we think is that the Marine Corps is on the same level as a bunch of gangbangers.
Yeah, but for the left, a lot of them think that. A lot of them are convinced that all guns are evil and should be melted down, that the military is horrible and awful and we should get rid of it. That's their mindset.
Yeah, and that's something that you honestly just need to tell them, grow up.
Yeah, but they won't. Yeah. And, this is probably another question that they're going to refuse to acknowledge because they're hypocritical. But if nothing violent is allowed on campus, how the fuck do they teach history? You can't talk about history without talking about violence. Or are they only talking about like a completely whitewashed version of history where nobody ever gets hurt?
The 100 Years Nerf War?
Yeah, how the fuck does this school operate if no violence of any kind is allowed on campus, period?
Yeah, and that is a problem. That's a serious problem where you run into a situation. In this case, just focusing on this shirt, I think it's a bad message. It's a bad thing to say to the kid. It's a stupid example. And, that's kind of what gets me, because the problem is if you want children to respect the law, one of the big things that you need to respect the law is that if people stop respecting the law, they stop obeying the law. And you can't have a guy with a gun behind everybody to make them obey the law. And things like zero tolerance hurt respect for the law because they show that there actually is no interest in justice or making a better environment. You're just checking off boxes. Now, when there was one case, like, for instance, I had to tell a kid when I was, doing summer school she came to school with one of these kind of, studded, half gloves. The gloves that has, like, the metal studs on it.
Yeah.
Well, that counts as a weapon. That's actually a weapon on school policy. And all I told her to do is, look, okay, if someone sees you with that, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. So what I want you to do is I want you to take it off. I want you to put it in your backpack. Please don't bring it back to school because that counts as a weapon on district policy. Problem solved. I told her is that, the thing is that you may not intend to use it, but the problem is people have come to school before and they use those and that will really make a mess of someone's face. And so that's why it is. Now, obviously it's not a shirt, but you want to use nuance in that thing. She wasn't coming to get into a fight. She was coming because it was a piece of jewelry she wore. The argument was forestalled. Really, in this case, the principal should have just let him wear it. He should have let him wear it. I don't really honestly see where many people, for one thing, I have to admit, it probably would have not ended up a national news story if he had let him wear it.
Yeah, and now the school ends up looking stupid.
The school ends up looking stupid, and really seriously, personally what I would do is add an addendum is that shirts with a patriotic message, so long as that message does not advocate violence against a identifiable, against another group, shall be allowed at the discretion of the principal. Problem solved. Because again, obviously, if you say, well, patriotic shirts are allowed, you are going to get some Nimrod who's going to come walking in and he's going to have a shirt showing some guy blowing the brains out of, an Arab or a Muslim or something. He's going to say, well, it's my patriotic shirt. This is the flip side that we really have to accept and we have to give, some credit for. A lot of these zero tolerance policies rose because people love to push the line. You can make the best policy possible and you will get someone walking in trying to push it as far as he can because he's an idiot and he wants to ruin it for everybody else. So, but I would say just, what needs to happen here is just change the policy, say, okay, well, we really didn't think of that. We're now going to have a policy allowing patriotic t-shirts so long as, again, et cetera, at the discretion of the principal.
Right, but they won't do. The only problem with that is you end up starting to make the rules. There isn't just a rule. You have to have an entire volume of rules because there's exceptions after exceptions after exceptions and exceptions to the exceptions. And
well, that's why you just usually what you got to do is you got to have you have to trust your principals. You have to trust your staff. And I know that in most cases you can trust them because we obviously talk about the exceptions. When you allow this, you've got to allow a certain degree of discretion. Now, unfortunately, discretion is very poisonous if it ever goes to court. That's another reason we got zero tolerance. But that's a case where, it's better if you allow a certain amount of discretion, as long as there's a review process, because people will occasionally abuse it. But again, discretion is king.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, when you get to court, there's an awful lot of people going, I saw a shirt I didn't like and I'm offended and therefore I'm going to sue you. That kind of shit, the court should just go, yeah, fuck you. Out of my courtroom.
Unfortunately, the problem is that the school district will say, yes, the judge can say that. But, the last court case I was in, we were doing depositions back and forth for like 2 months before we saw the judge. And that cost money. So one of the problems is that the school can say, yeah, even if the judge throws it out, we're going to be spending money. But, in this case, as I said, I would prefer discretion.
Yeah, well, that's why I'd really like in a lot of these court cases, whoever loses pays all the court costs, all the lawyer costs, 100%.
That has been brought up, but the courts don't like that because they say, well, first of all, obviously a lot of people lose court cases, especially if they're like suing a large corporation or organization, not because they had a bad, sometimes you lose. Sometimes you have a legitimate point, the jury doesn't agree, and you just lose. It's not something where it's a frivolous lawsuit. And the courts have always been very reluctant to encourage loser pays because obviously if, say, you're suing the friendly local, corporation because they, I don't know, had an unsafe working environment or something, and you happen to lose, if it's losers pay, you'll be completely destroyed. So the courts have a good point that losers pays isn't a good idea. Now they can declare you a vexatious litigant. they generally start forcing you to pay all the fees up front, and they can actually move to a point where the judge says you're not allowed to file a lawsuit. You have to get permission from the court before you can file a lawsuit. But that actually takes a while and generally requires somebody to be a serial abuser of the justice system.
Yeah.
But in this case, again, my opinion, give the principal discretion, give him flexibility, because for God's sakes, you already have him in there and supposedly supervising several hundred or up to 1,000 children.
Yeah, but
if we don't trust him to make a decision, do we really trust him to watch the kid?
Well, honestly, a lot of these people I wouldn't trust. That's kind of the problem, is a lot of this stuff comes from the administration. A lot of this really left-wing control jockey garbage, it comes from the administration. And these are not people I want making the damn rules, because these are the people who just kind of go, hey, Constitution, okay, that's a good suggestion. We're going to throw it out.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I would say it's not even so much politically based, because I've seen right-wingers have the biggest problem. The problem is that, let's face it, you have very good teachers, very good principals, very good administrators, but you also have an environment where they have a tremendous amount of authority over the student body, because children don't have civil rights in the same way parents do, whatever we say. And in many cases, you get the kind of people in there who you might not, let's just say the kind of people who are more interested in the power they have. It's an environment that can promote the growth of little tyrants. And that is unfortunately a problem we have with any organization like this. Again, going back to the Catholic Church, the priest at the top of the story. That's the one reason you have so many people vulnerable to that kind of behavior in the church is you have a position where people are put in a position of authority over vulnerable individuals, which is the same thing you have at a school. So when things go bad, they go very bad, especially if parents don't have the money or, for that matter, the interest to, bring a lawsuit against.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, if we have nothing more to add here, let's go and move to our last story.
Okay, yeah. Oh, Georgia. Never change. According to Atlanta's Fox 5 News, Douglas County District Attorney Brian Fortner announced the indictments against members of a pro-Confederate organization called Respect the Flag. The men of Respect the Flag are alleged to have outfitted their vehicles with oversized Confederate flags and drove around the community. The group entered a predominantly black neighborhood and pulled up to a house where residents were celebrating a child's birthday. The men harassed and threatened the guests, saying they would kill all you, niggers. What's the word? Yeah, okay. Now, wait a minute. I'm going to give Georgia a break. That wasn't really fair, because there was a time when the grand jury wouldn't even have bothered to bring an indictment. These guys are being indicted by Georgia. This isn't a case where the feds have had to come in and say the state's not doing its job. Georgia has indicted them. It's a case of they have a terroristic threat. It's not the same thing as what the feds would say when they're hitting you with terrorism. It's based on street gangs. And the indictments include acts of physical harassment that took place elsewhere on the same day as another part of Douglas County. Yeah, okay, you know what? There's nothing that says the flower of Southern manhood than driving into a child's birthday party and threatening to kill the child and, the parents and the party attendees. There is absolutely nothing. I mean, now, of course, we all know that the flag is about heritage, not hatred.
Sure it is.
Mm-hmm. This is, the only difference today and in the past is in the past they could have done this without ever getting called on it. But this is what the flag is about, guys. It's not heritage unless you consider the swastika to be an important part of Germany's heritage. Well, it is. It's just not a part people generally like to talk about.
Yeah, but the neo-Nazis certainly think that it is.
The neo-Nazis think it is, and that's kind of a good sign. Neo-Nazi, if Illinois, as they say, if Illinois Nazis agrees with you, you need to re-examine your life choices. But yeah, these are people. This flag was used as an embodiment of revolt. In a civil war. It was used then as a symbol of an atrocious racist government and society. It is not a flag that needs to be respected any more than the Nazi flag should be respected. I get pissed off every time I see it in a state capital. You are flying the traitor's flag.
But these people are proud to be traitors. That's the problem.
Proud to be traitors, yes. And I hope they get thrown into prison for a while to consider their acts. Because, and to speak of the bravery, since they always like to talk about how the Southerners were braver than the Northerners, you drove into a child's birthday party. Mm-hmm. Sort of like showing up to a Jewish kid's bar mitzvah dressed in SS uniforms with a bunch of Nazi flags.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only problem I have with this, all right, these people, they're disturbing the peace, they're trespassing, they're a bunch of racist assholes. I get really tired of people throwing around that terrorist word, which gets thrown around way the hell too much.
And in this case, I'm pulling up let me pull up the Georgia code, because it's actually, really what it is it is it's part of a Georgia street gang, abatement policy. And what it means is that largely street gangs would go around and they would use fear and intimidation. So when they're talking about terrorism, they're actually using terrorism in the actual sense, not in the symbol of a terrorist organization, but just groups who are causing terror. I think it could be better used. You could probably use a better term for it, possibly Street Gang Intimidation and Prevention Act. I don't know. But really it's focusing on trying to go against gangs who, will like show up in your neighborhood, and when somebody calls the cops, you see them wandering around outside of the house at all hours of the morning to let them know that's not allowed. So that's really what it's aimed at. I agree terrorism has been overused, but in this case it sounds closer than a lot of uses, but it's definitely not using terrorism in the sense that they're claiming they're affiliated with any foreign terrorist body or any larger terrorist organization.
Right.
It's a, felony, I believe. Let me, it allows, for instance, contraband, it allows for forfeiture, of all property that is directly and indirectly used or intended for use in any manner to facilitate a violation, any property constituting or derived from gross profits. In other words, if you are like intimidating people into paying you, they can take the money. So actually, interestingly enough, those guys' trucks can be seized under this law, which doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Yeah, my issue here, and I mean, I don't support what these people did in any way, shape, or form. These guys are a bunch of assholes, and, if somebody wanted to go out and beat the shit out of them, I don't care. But if you look at a lot of people who are talking about this, there's a lot of people who want to throw these guys in prison forever because they don't like what they think. Not what they did. It has nothing to do with what they did. They don't like what they think. That's thought crime.
Well, I would say that, if what you think is how can I, be evil to other people, there's obviously, I don't need to like what you think. Now,
no, that's not what they're talking about. These people, these people are obviously a bunch of racist assholes. Got that. I have no respect for them in any way, shape, or form. But these people want to take anyone who has any racist thought in their head, no matter whether they ever act on it, and they want to put them in prison for the rest of their lives because of something they have in their head.
Well, yeah, but that's,
and I'm sorry, but we, even though liberals don't like it, we still have this thing called free speech in this country. And I may hate what they stand for, but I'll fight to the death to defend their right to say what they believe, no matter who gets butthurt over it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is a problem that all sides have. I mean, I think there's been continual attempts to make it, illegal to advocate various types of birth control. I mean, every side knows that if you can control, like you said, thought crime. If you can make an opinion illegal, you've gone a long way to controlling that. That's why, we have a system of justice that says that's very nice you think that. That's your freedom of speech. However, these gentlemen are being, tried for violating a specific criminal code which has specific penalties associated with it. They will not be sentenced beyond those penalties because that's all the government does. The government can punish, and I know there's been times this has not been the case, but ideally the government punishes action, not thought.
And I agree with that. So, that's how it should be. Yeah, but there's a lot of people, if you go look at the comments in this story, there's a lot of people down there who want them to just be strung up by their balls because they think things that they don't like.
And, some of these people are probably reacting honestly on the initial thing of, okay, whether that been that my kid's birthday. I mean, people, let's face it, there will come a day when people on the internet and people in public, talk in measured tones and don't let hyperbole rule the day. That will be the day I agree that Jesus is real because he just fucking showed up. Because, that's going to be the only time I could expect to see the internet actually lose its hyperbole and histrionic statements. In all truthfulness, I'm not surprised that people are talking about putting them in prison for the rest of their life, because hell, I've been on boards when talking about Dungeons and Dragons when people got banned for making death threats about an interpretation of a certain rule. So yeah, people are upset, people are ranting and raving. In most cases, the people are just going to go off and, they'll find something else to rant and rave about. In this case, the important matter is just that the law itself doesn't attack their speech, for which I'm happy, because I don't want their speech to be attacked, because I don't want them to feel like they're martyrs. If you attack someone's speech, if you try to penalize someone's speech, it's really easy for them to decide they're a martyr. I don't want these jackasses to have the justification that we're martyrs.
Yeah, but by the same token, and I mean, here we go off topic a little bit again, but there are a lot of stories out there where people who, they may have like a Confederate flag on their car, like a bumper sticker or something, and somebody goes out and just breaks their windows because they don't like this bumper sticker.
Right, and that's a case where if you find out who they are, they should be punished. Breaking a window would be probably in most states misdemeanor vandalism, depending on the car. Might go up to felony vandalism if it's an expensive car. And then you sue them either in small claims court or, above, depending again on how much the money is, or you sick your insurance on them, and you say, because they took physical action, they engaged in physical violence against my property.
Yeah, but a lot of these people think they're completely justified doing any of this shit. Now, I can tell a story about this because a very, very long time ago, I put a Darwin fish on the back of my car. Very long time ago. And had it parked out in front of my house. And somebody thought, hey, I don't like Darwin fish, so they took a pipe and they punched it through the back of my fucking car right over the Darwin fish and then left a Jesus tract on my windshield. There's a reason I don't put this shit on my cars anymore. And, they just took off, filed a police report, my insurance covered it, whatever. But there are a lot of people out there who feel completely justified with property damage and violence because they don't like what's in somebody else's head.
And it's one of the great, again, that gets back to the earlier discussion we had about why secularism, the biggest thing about secularism, what makes it indisputably superior to other forms of civilization, is the fact that it took one of those big things. You can no longer murder somebody for their religious thoughts that they keep in their heads.
Yeah, but these are people opposing the Confederate flag. Those are secular.
People opposing it. Well, it's secular, but they have, the problem is that we've managed to, by and large, on both sides, obviously the guy who busted your window was religious, but, on both sides, secular, left, right, all sides, we've more or less arrived at the status where most of the people in the United States support the fact that you cannot criminalize speech. And you cannot take action against speech. And the people who are doing that are I would say in some respects outliers. Now we're not going to talk about at least I'm not going to talk about the people who rant and rave on the internet because again, that's common. But the people who actually take action to back up trying to suppress speech, we have the advantage that they're breaking the law. This is one reason why seriously, every time I see, someone trying to go against the First Amendment, for, let's get the racist. This is a problem Europe has. In Europe, you're not safe with your own thoughts. And what bothers me about that is that this is a weapon that your enemies can pick up and use.
But they don't care. That's the problem. They don't care because they don't think that their enemies will ever come to power.
Right. And that is the problem. Because yes, if these guys had driven around waving their odious, stinking, cowardly traitor's flag, and just driven around the neighborhood, I would be very upset if they faced any legal problems for it because they are driving around in a public place where the First Amendment holds sway. It's a city street. There is absolutely no way in which you can say that they would face legal action. That's why Skokie, the Skokie court case, where honest neo-Nazis wanted to march through a neighborhood where honest to God survivors of the Holocaust live. So these are not people who, read about the Holocaust or, heard about the Holocaust. These are people who could say that they were we graduated classes of Auschwitz 1945. And yet it was a great moment in our jurisprudence when by and large it was said, okay, yeah, it's a political march. You have a right to do it. Didn't really happen, but, they at least had the legal right. Because if you criminalize speech, you then leave the question of what speech shall be criminalized up to your political leaders, whichever group. I mean, right now, if you're listening to us and you're a liberal, I just want to say one word. President Trump, Supreme Court. Do you want that to be a major part of what constitutes allowable speech?
No, but I don't. I sure as hell don't want Hillary Clinton Supreme Court either.
Right. I don't want either one of them, because the fact of the matter is that sooner or later someone is going to make a decision on what constitutes allowable speech that I disagree with. But if it's the government enforcing it, unlike someone on the internet, they can send people with guns to my house to discuss the matter and, say, well, Mr. Gray, you just put something on the internet. I have a warrant for your arrest. That's a far different matter. That's why speech is so important. Now, people who want to rant and rave about this, like the people here saying that these guys should go to jail forever and ever and ever, I will point out to them that less than 100 years ago, there were laws about what you could say as far as civil rights go in the South. Major Supreme Court decisions. Southern states tried to force the NAACP to divulge their membership lists to them, obviously for perfectly innocent and not racist reasons. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, no, that kind of goes against both First Amendment and freedom of association. And we don't want to lose that. Eventually, to be honest, the people who want them to be put in jail for life, I would point out, they're not having a lot of defenders on the internet. So they're being punished for the acts they committed. And as for the other, you don't need to put them in jail. You don't want to put them in jail. You want them to be out there to shout their odious creed, because that tells people what kind of assholes they are and warns people to, not listen to them. It's kind of like the Westboro Baptist Church. They get out, they rant, they rave, they say they're terrible things. They have a First Amendment right to do it. I haven't seen a lot of people joining their church lately.
Ever.
So, yeah. And of course, obviously, there are exceptions to any rule. I mean, if these guys were standing out in front of a neighborhood telling people, I want everybody to come to these people's house and we're going to show them just who runs things in Georgia because tonight something terrible is going to happen to them. Okay, that moves into physical incitement to violence. That is one of the exceptions to the First Amendment. So we're not saying that the freedom of speech should be this completely untrammeled thing that you can say whatever you want, just that political speech in general and all forms of speech, the state has to prove that it's incitement to violence, or that's one of a very small number of exceptions to, the protections we have under speech. And by and large, the state's done a pretty good job of that. But no, please, if you're talking about criminalizing speech, criminalizing thought, just remember what goes around comes around. I can remember back in the 1970s, there were actually people talking about how the Republican Party would never again come to power. Then in the 1980s and early 1990s, Newt Gingrich talked about the permanent Republican majority in Congress. Then that didn't happen, and then the Democrats, said that, okay, we're going to run everything from now on, and now we're back to the Republicans. And, giving the government that kind of power to suppress speech, you will find that your enemy has that power at some point. Not mine.
Yeah, because it's never about, well, we're going to suppress their speech, but nobody's ever going to suppress our speech. Doesn't quite work that way.
Fortunately, by and large, when it gets to actual voting and stuff like that, most people prove that they understand this. The ones ranting on, and like I said, I think a good number of the ones ranting on the internet are just really pissed off about these guys. I would bet you there would be fewer people yelling about it if it had not involved a child's birthday party. Because that punches a lot of people's rage buttons right then and there. The idea that you would come in, the kids sitting there at the birthday party with the cake and maybe the bounce house and everything else, and they're trying to have a good time. And then you have a bunch of big guys with Confederate flags come in and threaten everybody's life. I mean, that, for a lot of people, that would just really push their berserk button bigger than anything else. So I think a lot of this is just people pissed off that, essentially a bunch of bullies came in and ruined a kid's special day. I know I would be pissed off.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with being pissed off.
So I figured that a lot of these comments, they're going to calm down. They're going to, and they're probably going to, when these guys are found guilty, because I have a feeling they're going to be found guilty, they're just going to, have big smiles on their face for the rest of the day. Because, for one thing, they came on the property without permission.
That was trespassing, and they're clearly guilty of things that they did. I just don't want them to be considered guilty because of things that they thought.
No, and probably their defense attorney is going to try to use that. He's probably going to want to change a venue. He's going to argue that this story became so popular that you can't find a jury that, is going to be unbiased. And that usually doesn't work because juries generally do a pretty good job of being unbiased in a lot of cases. In this case, it's going to kind of be the judge is going to look at the videotape and say, oh yeah, you can tell that the jury's going to have to make a real judgment call on this.
Well, I wouldn't say juries are unbiased. I mean, OJ. But he ran, man.
Well, the problem is though, is that I was actually listening to an interview because I think it was like 20 years ago. They had a committee of defense and prosecution attorneys on that, and they said the biggest problem with OJ was that the prosecution was like frickin' clown car. They had a federal prosecutor actually use those words, clown car. And that was that unfortunately is a case where if the prosecution is incompetent, it defaults to the guy's innocence. So this was an unfortunate case, where, well, I don't even know if it's unfortunate because the prosecution's supposed to have their shit together. That's why they get so much money from the state. And if they don't have their shit together, it does default to innocence. And hopefully, fire your prosecution team because they really should not have lost that case. They really should not have lost that case.
All right. Anything else before we move on to the main event?
Let us move to the main event.
The main event.
This is the main event.
Over the last couple of weeks, at least, I know I've been wondering why there's so much religious stupidity still in the world, like it ought to all just vanish because we're supposed to be so much better than that. And that kind of got me thinking that it wasn't that many years ago when the idea of people being able to be openly atheists seemed absurd, and the concept of legalized gay marriage equality was impossible, yet just a few years later, both have taken place. Religion is falling apart far faster than I ever thought it would. I never thought I'd see the level of change in my lifetime, maybe for my kids, but never in mine. Yet here we are. So I thought maybe we should spend some time talking about how fast things have changed and how far we still have to go, and if maybe we're hoping that things will happen faster than they will, based on the phenomenal changes that we've seen taking place so far. I mean, really, the changes that we have seen just in maybe the last 15 or 20 years is just amazing. I think it's taken everyone by surprise. And I think the internet has a lot to do with that. And I think there's a lot of things that we can place the blame for, or the credit for maybe. For example, in 2007, a Harris poll showed that about 12% of Americans were religiously unaffiliated, and today that number's 23%, and it's still rising. That's nearly double in just 8 years. We have gay marriage acceptance, which went from being legal in no states in 2003 to being constitutionally mandated in all states just 12 years later. So why are we still having stupid people?
Well, unfortunately, stupid people like smart people are kind of a fixture of the human condition. But, and also, I think part of it is, a big part, I'd say a tremendous part, is the internet. Simply because the internet suddenly allows people to access a world that was quite literally inaccessible. I mean, before the internet, what were you going to do if you wanted to meet somebody in another city? Call randomly? Just get your phone, sit down and call randomly? Today, for all the problems the internet has allowed a vast amount of interaction that just was impossible. And it's an amount of interaction that's not physically tied to any given location. I mean, you could be in a tiny town in Oklahoma, snowed in, and you could talk to people, lots of people, on a chat group. Lots of people on World of Warcraft. When you're ranting about a raid, you can open up a window to talk to your friend in sunny Malibu. That may not be good for your health if you're in, darkest, deepest Oklahoma in winter. But the fact of the matter is that the internet has allowed people to see a far greater variety. It's opened up a lot of circles. And I think one of the big changes is that, let's face it, a lot of things that are going away now were dependent on having a tight group consensus, and othering. You don't talk to atheists because they're the other. They're going to pull you down to hell. You don't talk to gays because they're the other. They're going to pull you down to hell. And because you never actually meet any of these people in your small physical circle, you don't have anything to tell you that that's not the case.
Yeah, but we have the same problem today, and we've talked about this before, where you get people who never knew anybody else who believed like they do. All of a sudden, they're able to form these communities with people who are spread out all over the place, and they don't feel alone, and they feel like they're more normal, even if they're not. Because this does apply to, the furries who want to fuck sheep. It applies to pedophiles. It applies to all these places. All these like sexual criminals, the pedophiles, the kids who are into kiddie porn, all that kind of stuff, their basic mode of communication and facilitation of their perversions is the internet. So it goes both ways.
It goes both ways, but I would say it goes more in the positive way than the negative way, because again, we have seen these incredible transformations occur. And the thing is, if you look at these incredible transformations, 2003, I think, World of Warcraft comes along in 2004. I'm going to tie this to World of Warcraft because I think Facebook also came in, what year did Facebook started?
I pay no attention to Facebook, people. Sorry. But while you're looking, you can also look at groups like Atheism Plus. And I hate to talk about Atheism Plus, even though it's deader than a doornail. But that's another one of those groups where you got a bunch of people who met online, who had a common ideology, and then who basically shut the door on anybody who disagreed with them, and they formed themselves into this tight-knit community online where they wouldn't allow anybody who ever disagreed to join the group or to join the discussion. So that's exactly the same kind of thing that we used to see in these little tiny churches where they never met anybody outside of their little insular belief systems because they refused to do it.
But I'd say the important difference there is that is a choice. That's an act of choice on the part of these groups. And yes, they do make it. But previous to the existence of the internet, it wasn't a choice. I mean, if you lived in a small town, you were stuck with your small town group. You couldn't make a larger choice. And that's the real big difference. Yes, people could choose to isolate themselves, but unlike the past, the default is not isolating themselves. The default is exposing themselves to a wider world. When you have these little groups, be they Atheism Plus, be they some of the religious groups, they have to actually then turn around and make the conscious decision, we're going to cut ourselves off. So for a lot of people who don't make that decision and who just, for instance, look at the news, because that's another fact of the internet. I mean, let's be honest. Previous to the internet, there were a very few gatekeepers for the news. You were at the mercy of what the editor of your small town newspaper or the editor of, if you were interested in like a larger city, the city newspaper said. Today, I look at BBC, Al Jazeera, if someone is interested in doing that, they have access to a wide range of newspapers, a wide range of news and information sources, many of which don't have the same gatekeepers.
Yeah, but that's problematic too, as we've talked about, because there was a point in time when the media considered themselves to have an obligation to inform the public. They told the news stories because that was their job. But as you got tons and tons and tons of outlets, they had to have something new. So they started coloring their news. They started only trying to appeal to certain audiences so that, you've got Fox News, which is only trying to appeal to the far right wing. You've got MSNBC, which is only trying to appeal to the far left wing. You've got all these different little outlets that they're trying to package their news and only provide news that they think that their audience wants to hear. That's not a good thing either.
Well, no, but you still have the freedom to seek out among these news. I mean, obviously, we're never going to have a perfect source of news. That just doesn't happen. And of course, if you look at like Randolph Hearst, you know that, okay, well, sometimes the news was slanted back even then. But if you have access to a variety of news stations, and of course, blogs, podcasts, ranging from the very well done to the crazy man ranting on the corner. It gives more choice, and it gives a wider exposure to a large number of differing views. And I think that's the big thing, because again, previous to this, it was far easier to create this. Everybody else, I don't have to work to other a person, because nobody's going to come out in my town as gay, because they're going to get, hurt terribly or killed. I don't have to look at places that do things differently. Now more people do, especially because, to some extent I'd say the social networks do have some benefits. I don't really like them because I dislike the privacy implications, but equally, more and more teenagers, more and more kids have wide-ranging social networks that may include, quite different people that they met through their friends. It's a case of, we're in a situation now where I say that the change is due to the fact that this world that we live in today now has a far wider variety of acquaintances that we can all meet. I know people in other nations. You know people in other nations. That never would have been possible before.
Well, I don't know, because I've known people in other countries back in the BBS days, long before the internet ever came along. But yeah, it's easier now.
But the BBS was right. And the BBS was kind of the first start of it. But I mean, the other thing is that the internet's become so ubiquitous. I mean, Facebook, I just found it got started in 2004 along with World of Warcraft. Today, if you don't have access to the internet, you're more the exception than the rule. To the point where actually people are now arguing that, if you have to make a choice between having a phone service and an internet service, you want to choose the internet service.
Well, because if you have an internet service, you have a phone service because you can do voice over IP.
But yeah, so we're in this tight thing. Now, as to whether we're going to continue changing, that's always hard to predict, because obviously one reason we've seen, if we're going to tie such a tremendous change as we've experienced now to the internet, well, the internet's been around now for quite some time. So we would expect the rate of change to start slowing down until something else comes up to really, kick us in the posterior. But, for us, I would say our internet was the same thing as the baby boom generation in the 1950s, where you had that tremendous sea change, brought back by, guys returning from World War II, moving all over the country, for the first time in, American history, you really saw these growth of the various Levitt towns and the development of an entirely new culture. And that's kind of what we have today, the development of a new culture.
Yeah, but I mean, we've gotten I guess we've gotten kind of spoiled by these massive changes that have happened in a very short time. And I guess we kind of look at it and go, well, why isn't everything changing at that speed? Because, damn, I wish it would. I mean, it's great that religion has fallen as ridiculously fast as it has. General religiosity has decreased consistently with each Pew study on religion. It's been falling since the 60s, but in the past 15 years, it's gone into a complete nosedive. And, I mean, of course, even in the last research study, they found that more than 75% of Americans think that religion has lost or is losing its influence on the American people. And that's a great thing.
Right.
But whereas even when we started this podcast just a couple years ago, I was going, God, I can't believe how fast everything's moving. And today it's like, God, why isn't it done yet?
Well, yeah, we are kind of spoiled. I mean, part of it is the fact that, religion is declining. I mean, really seriously, a lot of that decline is due to the fact that in at least America, religion became so closely tied with political stances. In the rest of the world, and another reason why religion is declining is America has, by and large, not had any major catastrophes. I mean, we are in a position where we can look at our nation and say, yeah, we're doing reasonably well. That I think, really harms the ability of a religion, because let's face it, a lot of religions thrive on, let me lay me down to sleep tonight if I do not wake. the Lord my soul
but you have to
take
look
tonight.
at like England,
In other words,
where 42% of the population identifies as open atheist, and it's growing all the time. We're not talking about spiritual but not religious. We're talking these are fucking atheists. In the U.S., that's nowhere close to that.
well, the U.S. has always been, England was less religious than we were all the way back in the Victorian era, which is why when they decided, oh my God, the common people aren't religious, they must not have churches to go to, then they built all
Now
those
they
churches.
have lots of car washes. Yes.
Car washes, yeah. But in America, we've always had a stronger sense of religious, generally because, let's face it, in the North, America was colonized by the people who were too whack job religious for Britain at the time. In the South, religion became an important part of maintaining the social order. And America is, going to stay more religious than England, I think, for some time because we still have those themes running. Religion has been used, the Great Awakenings. America's always had this very exceptionalistic view of itself, we're the shining city on the hill. So in America, I would say also part of the reason that it's enduring longer is religion also has this very close identification with patriotism in a lot of people's minds. Mom, Pop, apple pie, Jesus with the AK-47 or the Uzi.
Well, not an Uzi. That's not
M16.
an American. Yeah, M16. Let's do that.
You can tell us Mattel. And so we have that, and you see that. You see that even today in a lot of our politics. We back Israel because, well, for religious reasons. But, flip side, how many times have they been wrong about the return of Jesus?
All of them?
Mm-hmm. And, so I think the other thing is that the wave of religious feeling that grew up in the 1980s, some called it its own Great Awakening, is dying. These things ebb, and every ebb is lower than the previous. Again, they tied themselves to a political viewpoint, tied themselves to anti-gay, flat out proclaimed the America was going to fall into, the chasm like Sodom and Gomorrah. Didn't happen. A lot of people noticed that. If you'll notice in a lot of areas, highly religious communities often, track fairly well with poverty, possibly having something to do with a lot of your people graduated from Bob Jones University, which is as a university as is a gravel pit is,
Well, no, actually, it's reverse. The correlation is between non-religiosity and education. The more educated that you are, the less likely you are to be religious. Most of the people in these poor areas have never even graduated from high school.
Well, yeah.
Because they're not educated. And I think that's really, as people are becoming more educated, we are going to see people giving up all these ridiculous woo beliefs, religion, conspiracy theories, all of this garbage.
Well, when I say Bob Jones, I'm saying that also even a lot of the highly religious, even when they do graduate from universities, they're not graduating from the kind of university that really gives you a good edge. They're graduating from universities where their science textbook says, oh, by the way, if the facts contradict the word of God, the facts lose. I always remember that textbook from Bob Jones University. I think it was when there was a case they had lost their accreditation and they were trying to sue. But yeah, if you look at these things, if you look at these places that are, that don't have a lot of education, higher education correlates. Wow, that thought just went right out of my head. Hang on, let me try to.
Go find it.
Yes, go find it. Go hunt it down. And of course, a lot of these poor areas, they come from areas that didn't want education in the first one. The South came very late to the idea of, in a lot of these places, and since a lot of these highly religious areas are the South, which is why we call it the Bible Belt, the South really hated public education for a long time. That kind of, I think, left a mark. And then, of course, there was the era of, segregation, and then desegregation when some school districts just kind of closed themselves down. But yeah, these areas still have a very strong hint of if we don't agree with it, we're just going to pretend it doesn't exist and hope it goes away.
Well, I hope that kind of thinking goes away.
Well, so do I. Because these people are, well, let's just say that, I would love to see that kind of thing can go away because education is never bad. But again, like I said, another factor with the internet is it allows you to communicate with people. Yes, it can be used for evil, like when you get the one racist who finds his 500 best friends across the world and realizes he is not one, he is many. But equally, the same thing can happen to some kid who's 14 who realizes that he has feelings for the same sex, and it might literally be worth his life to admit. I mean, seriously. Think about the times that we've heard about in the past, unfortunately, where some kid came out gay and then caught an unfortunate case of death. So the internet allowed these people to communicate, and there were a lot more of them than were the racists. I mean, let's be honest. I don't want to be a Pollyanna, but honestly, over the years, racism has been in America dying out because, again, more exposure to people, more contact with people. It's not gone yet.
Well, I don't necessarily know that it's dying out. I think it's just less publicly visible because people have suddenly gone, holy crap, if I open my mouth and start saying this stuff, I'm socially ostracized.
Yeah, but see, I would say it's less prevalent because in the past you wouldn't be socially ostracized. If it was still as many people as it was, it wouldn't be socially ostracized because it'd be like, yeah, right, what are you saying? Everybody knows that. So I would say that we have seen a change there. But, again, one of the advantages, one of the reasons socially we've changed so much is because my belief is that the internet has allowed a great deal of communication, contact, people meeting different people, and really different people. I mean, not just someone from across the street, but someone who does not share your attitudes. And to go back to the greatest generation, this kind of tracks, because one of the reasons they argue, that the years after World War II saw such change is a lot of guys went to war, ended up in a platoon where you had a Harvard graduate and an illiterate dropout from the Tennessee hills, a Jew from Brooklyn. The amount of mixing that you got during the war was tremendous. And these people, of course, had to work with each other over the course of the war and came back and they were changed by it. And the internet, in a way, has had the same thing, only without, starving, freezing, and getting shot in Europe. So, positive point. And it has the same thing of putting people in contact with different people. And again, obviously, some people, their reaction to that is they scream like a startled baboon and run back into the cave of their friend's house. This does happen, but more people, I think, find it interesting. And again, it makes it harder to turn these other groups into just these non-human others that you can just ignore.
Well, I mean, again, depending on how you actually want to handle the internet, because there are plenty of people out there who are doing exactly that. But I think that they are, while they're vocal, they're not necessarily numerous.
Well, I would say the ones who are, like the racists, that they're vocal, they're not numerous. I mean, of course, the problem is one of the factors with the internet is because it is so open, anybody can throw up a web page. Anybody can throw up a professional looking web page. Anybody can go to Fiverr or Mechanical Turk and pay a few hundred guys to make it look like his book or his web page is really, really popular. So you do have to worry about that, which of course, is a benefit in and of itself, because a lot of people these days talk about, well, don't trust everything you read on the internet. That, I think, bleeds over into their daily life, into don't trust anything anybody just tells you. Because let's face it, a lot of our problems in the past were because people were programmed to believe what authority told them.
Well, I just say don't believe anything you read anywhere. I mean, if you read something, go check it out for yourself.
Right.
Don't just take somebody's word for it. Go out. You have the tools at your fingertips. Go out there and find out if these things are true. And I think that's one reason why religion has started to fail, at least in the more moderate religions. I mean, the crazy fundamentalist assholes, they're never going to go out and check to see if what they believe is true because it doesn't matter to them. But for the rest of them, I think that a lot of people have gone out and said, well, these are the things that I've been told are true. Let's go find out. And they run across all this information that says, no, these things are absolutely not true. And they slowly over time just kind of give up on their beliefs.
Yeah. And, give up on their beliefs, in some case keep them, become more moderate. The internet has a lovely way to erase dogma, which is a good thing, because let's face it, dogma's been pretty bad.
Yeah, except for the real crazy fanatics, and those are the people who double down on their own stupidity. And I mean, they're the ones who are forming these little tiny insular communities where nobody from the outside ever gets in, and they just sit there and scream and point fingers at everybody on the outside, and you know, just like Donald Sutherland, you know, they're the ones pointing out there going, "Evil, evil, evil."
Yeah, and, you know, I would say that, of course, the advantage is that they really don't have the same influence because they have to go now to these tiny little insular groups. And so, these insular groups are now, not as influential as they used to be, which is another factor. I mean, you know, we have to remember that, like you said, not too long ago, in fact, a blink of an eye by the way most historians view it, homosexuality wasn't simply not tolerated, it was illegal in a lot of areas. The sea change has just been incredible. So these groups, although they can go and form their own little forums and go out and demonstrate, they've lost what they once had, which was a near lock on society. And that is a good thing, because, you know, seriously, their history was measured and destroyed lives. Yeah. So I have no problem with knowing that. Now, in other things, of course, one of the negative aspects of this change is that, like, for instance, you see it every day. Someone talks about he read a story, a scientist said something, and tomorrow morning we're all going to be immortal. When in reality, if you look at the story, once you get to the source story, it's finding out that cultured mouse cells showed a 30% decrease in mutation when we give them this chemical. But, you know, it's decades and decades and decades away from any conceivable utility for humans. I mean, one of the things that the internet has done is, I think, made people a little bit less understanding that, no, some things do take time. And so you sometimes get this feeling that if it's not moving fast enough, oh my God, what's wrong?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have to still have patience, but I mean, I think we're all moving in the right direction.
It's, as long as we're moving in the right direction, because seriously, you know, I did not expect to see gay marriage. In fact, when gay marriage came up to the Supreme Court, I was really sweating, thinking we were going to get some Dred Scott decision. I was really afraid of a Dred Scott style decision. Didn't happen. Really happy, because guys, and especially anyone out here who's still saying, well, we're going to overturn it. No, that ship has sailed. Thank God. That ship has sailed. And the fact that today, well, things have changed. I mean, you know, I don't know about when you went to school, but when I see schools today, far more mixing of the races than there used to be.
Yeah, I mean,
far less tension.
Yeah, honestly, I don't even see, and I mean, that might be just where we are, because we're relatively close, but race doesn't even seem to be a remote concern. You don't see, I mean, when I went to school, and granted, I went to a highly religious school where I think I had 2 black people in the entire fucking school. But today, there's you don't have like your little black cliques and your little white cliques and your little Asian cliques and all your Hispanic cliques. You just see kids, and everybody is they're all friends, and race doesn't matter.
I mean, I seriously, when I see that, when I notice that, I can keep a smile on my face all day just by thinking about that, because so much, you know, when you think about how many people were not allowed to meet. I mean, in the old days, it wasn't that, oh, I don't really get with these people. No, society didn't allow you to interact with them. You paid a price if you tried to breach the barriers. And that hurt America and, you know, all over the world. I mean, you know, for so many years, to see that going, I mean, I will accept every damn frickin' picture of lolcats that comes across my, you know, that chokes my inbox, and every idiocy that I see on the internet, but the internet helped play a role in that. For that alone, it has more than paid back every amount of effort that's been put into it.
Yeah, I mean, I know my mother grew up as a complete racist. She was raised that way. She was not allowed to play with black kids. She was not allowed to play with anybody who wasn't white. Because that was just the time. She's not like that now. Now, you know, now she's got black friends. She's got all kinds of people. You know, granted, she's in her 70s. So, you know, but she's online all the time talking to people all over the world. It's changed her entire perspective on reality. And I think that's a wonderful thing that the internet has given us all. Because without it, I don't think that a lot of people would ever change.
Well, no, because they wouldn't know other people. I mean, the first step to changing, I think, is to meet, you know, one of the first steps, I think, to change, and it's happened, is to get online or find somebody and find out that, you know, the guy in, Africa, the guy in Japan, or whoever you're talking to, he has good and bad days too. His kid is sick today, can't go to school, so, he's having to figure out what to do because the kid's dragging around the house, to find out that they are people that have many of the same concerns that we do. Now, that doesn't give anybody a pass if you are behaving in a bad manner, but it at least makes you human, because let's face it, if you look at propaganda, both international, like during World War II against Japan and Germany, and the shit that the racists pulled in America in the 50s and the 60s defending segregation, a huge component of that is to turn these people into something not real, something that doesn't have any attributes of really humanity about it. The Japanese is the buck-toothed, yellow, drooling maniac that exists only to, go after mom, dad, and apple pie. The African is somebody, African American, the Negro is somebody who sits here and drools after white women, and so segregation is the only thing that protects our women. And when you get on the internet, when you actually encounter these people as real people, that propaganda falls apart really damn fast. And then all of a sudden you're left thinking, if that makes no sense, does anything they said make any sense? And then at that point, that's when their whole odious structure comes crashing down. It is the difference between guys who, could have done, to go back to our story about the Confederate flag, it's the difference between guys who could have driven around in their little community with everybody cheering them because they were showing the other side what their place was, and guys right now who are notably hated on the internet and going to go to jail for what they did. Yeah. And that is a good thing. I'm happy that that's the world that we're all growing up in. I mean, just as another example, I recall reading a little while ago that someone was being nasty to a retarded child, which right now is a subject very close to my heart. And a fair number of the students in the school suggested that if the individual felt the need to make fun of somebody who couldn't fight back, they could invite him around the corner of the building and he could have fun with people who could indeed fight back. And, when you and I were growing up, that was not at all common. And that's another thing. I mean, I think one of the great things that the internet has done beyond anything else is it started giving people the sense to say, wait a minute, why do I obey the state, the religion? Why do they have a claim on my obedience without giving me a reason why they make sense? You don't have a claim to tell me to make a decision just because it's what I'm supposed to do. Tell me why.
Yeah, unfortunately, more people need to be doing that because there's a lot of people out there who just seem to think that, well, because I said so is the only answer you should be able to provide.
There's a lot of people out there, but there's a hell of a lot fewer than there used to be. And so that's one of the things that we look at. It never happens as fast as we want it to, but it happens faster than we fear it would. Let's put it that way.
All right. Well, do we have anything else for the week?
No, I must go and do stuff with my bank now. Yay. But, yeah, by the way, guys, I'm just going to give you a quick warning. If any of you took out a HELOC, a home equity line of credit in 2000, you might want to check the terms on that HELOC because they're all coming due right now.
Oh, yeah, so, that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, they're already saying it could be the second mortgage wave, because basically, right before the bubble burst, all kinds of people were saying, hey, it's not enough that I pulled out $700,000 on my house. I'm going to take out a $100,000 home equity line of credit. I'll never have to pay it back because the house will get more and more wealthy. Well, the trick with those home equity lines of credit is that for the first 10 years, you just pay interest. Then you start repaying the loan. That's something that people out there may want to look at.
Yeah. All right. The one thing that unfortunately never changes around here is the number of crazy religious and political stories we come up with. Hopefully someday that won't be the case, but for the moment, there's a never-ending supply. If you have any stories you'd like us to take a look at, send them our way. You can get our email address at the website, or you can put them up in the comments for this very show. Make sure you let people know about the show and spread the word. You might even consider giving us a good review over on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. We certainly wouldn't complain if you did. So until next week, keep thinking about things you believe and make sure your positions are rational. Somebody has to counterbalance all the crazies and the stories that we take on every week. So till then, adios.
Farewell all.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Bitchspot Report podcast. We invite listeners to interact with the show by commenting on our website at report.jdragononline.com. We can also be found on most social media sites, including Facebook, Google+, Tumblr, and Twitter. You can also listen on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Player FM, as well as on the aforementioned website. New episodes post every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Those interested in being on the air, please visit our website. All instructions are there. We appreciate our listeners and supporters. We couldn't do this without you.